for the virtual happy hours, the goal is kind of meant to do a couple of things. One, provide a little bit of a respite or oasis away from, all of the news cycle and everything that's going on, and whatever's happening now with the boat that hit the bridge in Baltimore, or all the other stuff. And of course, an election year in the United States, that's always, tough, et cetera. So this is meant to be like, we're stepping away from those things. We don't have to think about them. Instead, we can focus on ourselves and have interesting conversations with interesting people. We do that centered around typically a theme each month, something that either is requested or people want to know more about, or something that we're thinking about and exploring, and an opportunity to just kind of connect with each other through conversations and ideas, et cetera. And so the theme that I was roughly thinking about this week or this month is around this idea of doing something great. So I graduated from The Ohio State University, and while I was there, the logo or the slogan at the time was to do something great. That was their kind of like mantra or whatever, their hype kind of thing for it. It's changed now. I'm not even sure what it is right now. But while I was there at Ohio State, I started an improv comedy group. So that's how I got into humor and improvisation. Was me and six friends who were constantly hanging out, playing, video games together, making each other laugh, etc. Wanted to one of the guys in the group really wanted to start an improv comedy group. He needed people, and so basically the five of us were the people he recruited to join. As I shared my TEDx talk and other places, and joke that I was not recruited because of my comedic abilities. I was rather recruited because of my project management skills. I was going to be kind of the business-minded person for the group. But from that, I, learned this skill of improvisation. I got better at it over years because I was terrible when I first started. And it ultimately led to Humor That Works as an organization now, right? Long-term, in terms of seeing the value and benefit of humor in the workplace. But when we started the group, we weren't even entirely sure if it was going to last past the first 2 years, right? We were sophomores when we started it. So where we kind of thought this would be a thing that we would do for 2 years, and then maybe it would go away or whatever. It is celebrating its 20th year this year, where I'm going back to the reunion show this weekend. So this is why I'm thinking of do something great again. And what it kind of helps me to think or reflect on is the recognition or realization that if we want to do something great, it requires us to do something, right? Like we actually have to take action, and we may not always know what that thing is going to become or do, right? Like I didn't start doing stand-up comedy to eventually get a Dry Bar special, right? That you mentioned, Paul, a little bit about Dry Bar. First of all, because Dry Bar did not exist at all when I first started, when I was doing it, back in 2004. And my first set, every set that I've done almost since then, or like since my early days, has been like very clean comedy. But my first set wasn't cleanest. I didn't curse, but I had more innuendo, et cetera, in it. So it's like, these were not things that I thought, but I still needed those initial steps or stages of being very bad at comedy to get to the point of a Dry Bar special. I needed those very, as the eighth floor, we needed these very terrible, that was the improv group. We needed these very terrible shows that we would do in these basements of residence hall where, four people would show up, and it was not very entertaining. We needed those to ultimately get to a 20-year anniversary that we have, later. And so, I think for us, thinking about if a goal of ours is to do something great, is to have an impact either on individuals close to us or on a larger group, it starts with taking some form of action. We need to actually, do something. And so that's kind of a little bit of the focus of what that we talk a little bit about today is how do we ultimately dare to be great, or ultimately how do we do something great, knowing that it first starts with taking a little bit of action. And I've been thinking a little bit about this more recently because of some work that we're doing in Humor That Works. We're redefining our mission statement, getting a little bit more clear on the people that we want to serve and how we serve them and all of those things. And, a question that was asked of me that I think is a really interesting question is, what do you want to be remembered for, either as an organization or as a person or as a leader or as a parent? what are the things that you want to be remembered for? And so I'm curious, you can either share out loud, or Lisa, you can also drop in the chat if you don't want to come on mute, is what's something that you would like to be remembered for, either in the context of family or in the context of work or the context wherever? What's something you would like to be remembered for? Anything that comes to mind for you, Paul?
Just a person who, loved his family, loved his friends, and was had very strong, deep relationships.
Yeah, I think those are great things to be remembered for. And again, Lisa, if you want to come off mute, you can share, or if you want to drop something in the chat.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I loved well.
Ooh, yeah, I like that. Loved well. What does loved well mean to you, do you think? What does that comprise of?
Um, Accepting people as they are and loving all of the parts of them. And yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of it. I think, if I think about what I want to be remembered for, I think part of it is maybe borrowing some of this to know that I loved well. I think is wonderful to be, seen as loving and caring and connected with family. I think is really valuable. From an organizational perspective, if with Human That Works, we want to be remembered, and or perhaps, you can be, you might change this so it's not quite so future paced thinking. It's like, what do you want to be known for? Perhaps maybe more so than remembered for. But yeah, we want to be remembered for, known for, creating more positivity and joy in the world. My, part of the refining of this mission of why Human That Works exists is I was pushed into improv and stand-up comedy, right? I needed this person to say, hey, we're starting an improv group and you're joining me because you're one of my closest friends, right? And it's transformed, it's changed my life, right? Improv and stand-up has made me more confident, both in terms of being a presenter and being able to do talks like this, and stand up in front of people and talk, but also confident just in my own ideas, that the things that I think of are worthy enough for me to explore further and also potentially share with other people. It's helped giving me a better perspective on the things that happened to me. It's made me a lot more of a positive person with, like, say, the improv mentality of yes and. There's much more of an aspect of how do I make things a little bit more fun when something difficult happens to me or something is stressful. It's like, okay, how do we solve this problem, or at least have fun in the process? And it ultimately got me better results. I do think doing improv and stand up helped me get the job at P&G, because I was this introverted computer geek who is good with computers but also could talk to people, sort of. And so I got better, etc., over time. And so it's unlocked this entire new world for me. And I think part of the mission that we have at Human That Works, the reason why I'm so passionate about it, is that I want to be that gentle push for other people as well. Just as I required someone to kind of push me into doing a little bit of improv and stand up, and it changed my life, I want to be that gentle push for other people to be more intentional of how they bring a little bit more joy and levity and humor into their day and life, in multiple different ways. And so for Human That Works, for us to be remembered for unlocking that for people, for being a bright spot in sometimes otherwise difficult days or components of it. And I think for personally, that same thing of being loved, and I want people to be like, oh yeah, I had fun with this person around, that I wasn't causing more stress than bringing more fun, etc. And so the follow-up question that this person asked me after asking, like, what do you want to be remembered for, what do you want to be known for, I'll admit was a little bit of a struggle for me, was the follow-up question was like, are you doing the things now to be remembered for that? Are your actions and behaviors in alignment with that goal of what you're remembered for or not? And for me, I had to do a little bit of reflecting of like, all right, if I want to be known for, for my 2.5-year-old daughter, is this, I want her to think of our experiences together as being very fun and playful. Is that actually happening more often or not? Or is it the stress of a meeting that I'm in, and then I'm coming out and I'm seeing and she's coloring on the walls, and it's immediately into like, no, don't do that. The stress, like, right. So it's that balance. So I'm curious, how do you all feel with that reflective question back to say, like, are you doing the things, like, is your actions and behaviors aligned with what you want to be remembered for? Do you feel like you're doing it well? Do you feel like you have some opportunity area? Is it something that you've never thought about before? Is it something that you're like, no, I think about it each day and it's a way, I define the actions that I take?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes to both questions. Yeah. I mean, probably half and half, in that, I've actually got it written down because I was, I'm 10 months into retirement from a career in consulting. Therefore, yeah, I got that going for me. So I kind of planned all that out. So I'm kind of laying it all out as to what I want to achieve. And so it's kind of along the lines of, well, okay, if you're in this next phase or whatever, well, it's almost what do you want to be remembered for, or whatever you want to be known for now.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of laid out that kind of plan, and it's a whole new kind of transformation, recreation, or whatever. And so I'm kind of executing on that to a certain degree, and with some success and with some opportunities to do some stuff.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm curious, in your prior career, were you also already thinking about that? Or is this more a little bit more recent because you're in retirement that you're like, I can focus on this type of thing a little bit more?
No, no, no. I was pure business consulting, process consulting, which I think you kind of like what you were doing at P&G within the IT organization, maybe IT organization, it sounds like, but I was all in the finance business organization, everything, process improvement, all that stuff. So, and I did that honestly for like 30 years at Anderson, PwC, and EY. So I was in that world, but now am, free to do whatever I
Yeah,
want. So,
exactly. I like it. Fantastic. And Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I've never asked myself that question, but in thinking about how to respond to that, I feel like I'm acing a test for the first time in a long time because I can honestly say that I am doing the work day in and day out to love the best that I can. And it isn't always easy,
Mm-hmm.
but I make a conscious effort every day to do that. So, yeah.
No, I love that. And I think the value in reflecting on these things, I think is to one, either say like, so in my case, it's the reflection on to say, hey, I'm not always showing up the way that I think, externally I would want to, so it can help to drive some behavior change. But if we are doing those things, so on the humor that work side, I do think that we're living a lot of that mission, et cetera, that it's important to reflect on it so that we can also give ourselves credit for it, right? Because of like, there's so much hard days and things like that, that it's a wonderful thing that, if you're experiencing a hard day or stressful thing or something doesn't quite go exactly the way that you want to be able to take a step back and be like, yeah, like the thing that's really, really, I'm at least, taking care of this thing. The other stuff may slightly fall, but as long as this thing is kind of still happening, it's a really valuable thing. So hopefully you give yourself that kind of pat on the back as well, that if that is a thing you want to be known for and you're living it, that is a truly wonderful thing to build and think about. So I think that's one way we can think about how we do something great, is defining those things. And the question that I asked of this group that I was working with is like, okay, why focus on this? Why is this a thing to really define? And so part of it is it helps you define what actions you want to take each day, helps you to maybe potentially make decisions as well. And it can be a little bit more introspective, because I will admit that I am not too much of a like, I'm an engineer by mindset. That's typically what I think of. And so what she hit me back with, though, is thinking about this as a way to kind of frame it, and perhaps you've heard it before, is that the idea that for some people, like one definition of hell is that on the day you die, you meet the person you could have been. Right. Which is pretty deep for like a Wednesday morning, if you think about it. But like on the day you die, you meet the person that you could have been. And I think that's another kind of future pacing idea to think about, of like, okay, how am I in comparison? And I was thinking about this kind of last night, because my normal, habit a little bit is towards the end of the night, I will, I feel like this need to compress, etc. So I'll go on social media. Oftentimes I'll go on Reddit and just kind of scroll through, and I'll look at the NBA subreddit and the NFL subreddit and kind of see what was popular throughout the day. And that question made me reflect of like, when I'm old and gray, way late down the road, am I ever going to be like, man, I should have spent more time on Reddit. I should have been like, I didn't waste enough hours on that. Like, and realizing like, oh, if I were to take some of that time, and not to say, I'm not saying that decompressing is a bad thing. It's like, no, I don't think we can always be 100% productive, etc. But like, is that the source that I want it to be? Or what if I replaced Reddit with watching interesting documentaries? Or what if I replaced it of watching at least like an Emmy award winning show, as opposed to kind of like random posts that might actually make me upset because it's, about some political thing that's happening, etc. And so that future kind of pacing question was helpful for me to start to think about of like, okay, what are the big actions I'm taking might be somewhat in alignment, but are the small ones going to help me get to that, that delta change between the person that you could have been? Any thoughts or reflections on that quote? It was my first time kind of hearing it, so it was kind of a little bit of a whoa moment for me. So I don't know, what do you agree, disagree? Is it interesting? Is it one of those bullcrap quotes that don't really mean anything? Any reflections on the day you die? One definition of hell is that on the day you die, you meet the person you could have been.
No, I agree. I don't know. I don't know if I like the death part of it. That's a little dark. But the future perfect thing always resonates. I always like to begin with, okay, what's the future perfect state of anything, that you want to have, and then how far away am I or are we from that future perfect state, and what's the gap between there, and what do we have to do to, what steps do we have to take, whether they're baby steps or big steps or whatever, to get to that, call it future perfect or whatever state, to get there. And it may just be a bridge too far, but it's usually not. It's usually just, hey, let's take the first step to get there. And that first step may be the hardest step to take.
Yeah, very certainly. And that's something we, and last month's happy hour, we talked a little bit about this concept of like taking a leap, and we defined BHAGs. If you've heard BHAGs, if you've ever read Jim Collins, I think Good to Great, or one of the other books, but it's kind of BHAG stands for Big Hairy Audacious Goal. And those ideas of like thinking really big, etc. What do you want to try to achieve? And these should be goals that are really exciting for you. They almost like disrupt the status quo, where it's not like, oh, that'd be interesting. But like, no, this is our moonshot, right? The idea of like, we're going to go to the moon. But we also talked, as part of getting there, a starting place is that minimum viable action, right? Getting past that state of getting inertia to the point that we can actually take some steps. So what's the smallest action that you can take that is actually getting you towards that goal, so that you can create a little bit of momentum, and that you have, a day where you're at least making however much progress. Any progress is at least a little bit more progress than yesterday. So that makes sense. And I think makes perfect sense of coming from a world of consulting of like, oh no, we're just finding that as a goal. Here's a goal state to get to it. Let's go there. So I like that. Lisa, any reflections on the quote?
Well, first my thought was, whoa. But then I was like, every single decision we make alters who we are. So I could be looking at a sea of Lisas with infinite variables. And then I was like, oh, well, so I'm living my best life. The end of the journey doesn't matter. It's the journey that counts. So what actually resonated more with me was, how do I spend my free time? How do I decompress? Finding more valuable ways to spend that time is something that I could definitely work on. So I really liked that.
Yeah, no, and I think you're exactly right. I'm not sure if you all are Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, but in some ways it's thinking about like Loki and TVA of like all these branching timelines, et cetera. And you're like, is there a sacred timeline or not? It's like the sacred timeline is the one that you're on, but that is a great reflection, is that there wouldn't be a singular person that you'd be talking to in the end of that scenario. There would be, infinite in many ways, right? Because every small decision gets there. But so that actually is a great reframing thing for me to think about. And there is that component of, how are we spending that free time or downtime? Because I'm realizing, like, if I watch a show, then I reflect on that show. It's a thing that I'm maybe thinking a little bit about when I go to bed. And so, what is the input that I'm thinking about, right? So if I'm recently watched True Detective season 1 for the first time. And so it's like, oh, I'm thinking about how good the acting is and all this other stuff. But then at the same time, I'm also thinking about a little bit about like death and serial murders, et cetera, versus I think, I don't know, the impact that like the TV show Ted Lasso had on me, which I absolutely love the show Ted Lasso. It's like, oh, when I'm laying down to go to bed or when I'm reflecting on the show, now I'm thinking about, here's this person who's trying to be positive in the constant negativity, and it made me laugh and smile. So to your point, Lisa, like maybe there are some more constructive or positive ways, not to, again, it doesn't have to be never have any decompression time whatsoever, but what's a more positive way to create that? And that's similar what we're trying to do on social media. And what I try to do with my own social media feed is more and more follow artists and comedians or comics, people that inspire me, so that if I am going to take that break to scroll through, it's not like, doom and gloom, but more of fun and puns. I don't know. I need to come up with a rhyme instead of doom and gloom. Joy and bok choy. No, that's still not it. I'll get there eventually. But that's a great kind of pulling out that reflection piece of that delta change. So for we can kind of quick a quick pause there. So the kind of the rest of the direction that I was going to go with the session today is talking a little bit about thinking about some of those goals to get in alignment with doing something great, which we can explore. We can kind of go into conversation. Like I said, I'm happy for this to be somewhat of a choose your own adventure style thing, because I'm enjoying the conversation with you all. So we can kind of go that direction. Or if there's something else that you all would like to talk about or deep dive on or anything, I'm open to thoughts or suggestions. Yeah. Explore some goal things. So I can share a little bit more what I'm learning about these things. So in addition to, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to say, and it's purely selfish on my part. And so, but one of the things I have on my retirement agenda, which I want to try to cover, and which is one of my interests in what you do, Andrew, and it may be a separate conversation that you and I have, but it's pursuing comedy and corporate comedy and everything, kind of leveraging my background into humor and corporate humor, or just humor, or stand up and everything. And I guess a good question would be, how much does improv influence stand up, or stand up influence improv, which is better? And I think you do corporate humor and everything, which is better, I don't know what you would call the non-corporate humor versus corporate humor. Which do you find more fulfilling, or everything? And then maybe which came first, improv or stand up, and which influences the other, and whatnot. Do you have any perspectives on that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, happy to share those, and I can put those maybe kind of in the context of the goals that we were talking about. Because I also don't want to go unless Lisa, you're like, I absolutely want to learn all of those exact same things as well. You might be like,
yeah, I don't want to, maybe totally outside the context of it, but it is. Hey, if you want to do something, you ask the question.
Absolutely, no, I think it's a great thing.
Say, hey, that's off topic. Let's get out of here. But I would like to have a separate conversation with you, actually. So.
Yeah, for sure. We can set up a separate time for a seperate conversation, go deeper into the conversation of it. The thing that I'll say that's maybe a little bit more applicable is that, if for some strange reason, I don't know why this would ever be the case, but if I was somehow put in like the charge of the Department of Education, like, again, there's no scenario where that's ever going to happen. But if for some reason I woke up and that was the thing, one of the things that I would want to implement is that every person take an improv class. Like improv as a class it teaches you not just comedy skills, but life skills. It is for fellow introverts like me, for people who are a little bit socially awkward. One, it gives you a safe place to practice like the skill set of listening and communicating and sharing. And it does it in a really fun way. So it's not like, here's a listening exercise that you have to practice and now regurgitate what they've said. It's like, no, it's like you get to play and you have fun. And in the process, you're learning how to be more present, how to not shoehorn your own ideas into the conversation, but rather react to what people say. You learn the yes and principle of like constantly not saying yes in terms of agreement, but yes in terms of heard what you've offered. And the and component of being like, okay, I need to add something to it. It's not enough in an improv scene just to say yes and go along with what someone else says. You've got to bring something to it. You've got to take your next action. And so that yes and mindset and the practice of that, doing that kind of continually in each class or in each workshop or each day, was hugely transformational for me. And so that would be the thing that I would encourage everyone. And it's also part of how we train. So if you've been to any of our workshops or even some of the trainings that we do here when we do breakout exercise, et cetera, we use a lot of applied improv exercises. So exercises that come from the world of improv, but how they apply to communication skills or leadership skills or stress management skills or emotional intelligence or whatever. There's fun ways to practice some of these skill sets. So for me, improvisation came first. And then we had this terrible mistaken idea where we thought, hey, if we can be funny when we make it up, it's got to be easier if we're funny to be funny when we write it down first. And it turns out that, at least for me, stand-up is way harder than improvisation because the expectations of the audience are a little bit different. And so stand-up became a little bit later, but it became a practice and a skill to kind of learn. And where that I think connects with from a larger standpoint is, one, any goal that you have, I think improvisation is a great thing to kind of learn and build off of. But two, that you aren't always sure how that's going to go, like where it's going to go. And I do think, one of the questions that I was asking or going to ask or thinking about when it comes to these goals is, there's to do something great, there's a combination of this idea of what do you want to be known for? What do you have passion for? What you kind of want to be recognized? And then also, what are you good at? Right? Like it's kind of that form of ikigai where it's that intersection of a couple of different things. But one of those intersections is, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And also, what are you good at? What's your skill set? And can those things overlap? And then also, what brings you joy or passion? And what, from a business perspective, what will people pay for? Right? If it's about kind of starting a business, or what skill set that you have. So I'm curious, I'd love to hear from both of you. What's something that you would say you're good at, that you think you're better at than, say, the average person? Anything come to mind? Anything that people tell you in terms of your strengths? Or sometimes thinking about this is also what are things that come pretty naturally or easy to you? Because sometimes we don't even realize that we have a strength because we're like, oh no, everyone can just, get up and stand up in front of people, right? That's not hard. And it's like, for us introverts, we're like, oh no, that's one of the hardest things I had to learn. But for certain people, it's like, nope, that's super easy. Anything that come to mind, Paul or Lisa?
Yikes, that's all I got right now.
Nice. Well, I mean, there's probably an aspect of something that you do well, and the fact like that you do love well. So there's probably, skill sets along with that might include things like, being a good active or, present listener. Or it might be, aspects of clear communication or empathy for other people. Those are certainly things that like I think are skill sets that you may have. Any of those resonate, or anything that trigger any other ideas?
Yeah, I would say I'm not quick to judge.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Self-reflection is hard.
It is. It is. And that it very much is, because we don't know. I think oftentimes, we don't know. Like I said, if something comes a little bit more naturally to us, we don't realize other people struggle with it. We don't realize it's like, oh, that's the strength. That's not just something that how, everyone is.
Right.
Like my oldest brother got, better than 20/20 vision from my dad. And then me and my middle brother both got my mom's vision, which was like terrible. And so he's like until we started needing, he thought glasses were like an old person thing. Like growing up, he just assumed that it was like everyone's like that, right? And he didn't know that it was different for the entire rest of the world, like for majority of the world, to not be able to see things so clearly far away, right? So it's like a strength that he didn't know. So those types, like just a sample metaphor of like we sometimes don't know it because it's like, oh, it's always been this way for me. But realizing some of those like empathy or being really present, etc. That's not like my brother has ADHD, and that's being really present for him is sometimes really tough because he's scattered by a bunch of different things. So and like you said, that self-reflection component of it, some people have that as a really good skill set. I'm not sure if it's me, but other people do. What about you, Paul? Anything come to mind?
I would say, and I'm just thinking, from work life and things like that, just solutioning, coming up with and facilitating, teams, facilitating projects, things like that, solutioning, come up with solutions to problems, identifying the problem and then creating the solution and then communicating. I don't really have a fear of communication with either people, groups, whatever, so being able to communicate things like that.
Yeah, no, I think those are great strengths, great goals or skill sets certainly to have. And then you can start to think about like, okay, yeah, how can I use that or leverage that? And so as we think about this idea of doing something great, like I said, part of it can be defined by what I want to be known for, this is what I'm good at, or it could be defined by a goal that you already have or a thing that you're thinking about. And an exercise that I recently went through that I thought was really interesting was around kind of expanding that goal, right? Because the goal within Humor That Works is to one, elevate the status of humor. We want to help more people understand that humor is a valuable skill to learn, that it's not just for stand-up comedians, that it's not just so your friends think that you're funny, but that it can be a valuable professional skill, professional or a leadership skill, or that it can help in terms of your relationships or, with family members as well, but, and also in life and work, etc. So it's partially to elevate the status of humor and then also to, be that gentle push for people to use it more intentionally in their life. And so the goal of that has traditionally been like, oh yeah, we do that kind of through speaking and training, et cetera. And so the question then was like, okay, how could you make that 10 times bigger, right? What would that goal look like if you were to make it 10 times bigger? What would it look like? And then the reverse of that to say like, what would it look like if it was 10 times smaller? If you're to just do it at a micro level, what would it look like? And I thought it was a really interesting exercise to kind of build. So I'm curious, do you all have a goal or a thought kind of in mind that you're working on, thinking about, that you could do that as a quick exercise? So I guess maybe the first question is, any goals or thoughts that you have in mind? For Paul, it might be like, hey, I want to get into, corporate or humor speaking or something like that. Or it could be something else. But or Lisa, I'm not sure if you have a goal or a thing that you've been thinking about or something that you're working towards for work and life or life.
I'm not a goal-driven person. I realize that about myself. Everyone seems to have goals, and mine is just to live well. So for a long time I thought that was like a failing, and I decided I'm not going to view myself that way.
No, I don't think that it's a failing at all. Like you said, to live well and loved well, that's a wonderful way to approach things. Do you have a like a way that you define or think about living well, or is there an aspect of how you want to live well? Because there's different ways that you can kind of achieve that.
Honestly, I would say my number one thing is kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be kind. I try to do that all the time. I love the word. I love the sentiment. I love the impact that it has on other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I could have huge, big kindness and then tiny little bits of kindness. So everywhere I go, everything I do, I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna continue to work on that.
Yeah, which I think is that I think is what's really interesting, or what was from me thinking about 10 times bigger, 10 times smaller, was helpful as a reframing, was almost a 10 times smaller, thinking a little bit about it is like, yeah, that kindness. So if kindness is we'll call it quote unquote a goal, but is the desire, a drive, I think a lot of times we think like, oh, what could that be in big ways? Like, no, what are the smallest acts of kindness that I could do in a given day? The simpleness of like, holding the door for someone, or taking in the newspaper for a neighbor. I'm watching Better Call Saul right now, so I'm still stuck in whatever era where they actually delivered newspapers to the doorsteps. Like, I realize like there's very rarely people that you maybe don't have that many neighbors that have newspapers getting delivered to the front of their driveway, etc. But like, to your point, that it could be those small things, but I do think it can also be interesting of that, if a component of this is the do something great, if there is that feeling of like bigness to it, is like, okay, yeah, what does that look like at an even bigger scale potentially for you, in terms of additionally, not just how you treat people, but is there a kindness in like, oh, well, I teach other people how to be kind, or I, make sure that I instill that in my loved ones. Is it, any thoughts on kind of the, some of the big ways that you look to be kind?
Not exactly, but what I would say is that oftentimes when we think of kindness, we think of how do we give it to other people, or how do we show it to other people? And I'm in a time right now where I'm realizing that I've expended so much of that to others that it's been at the deficit of myself. So now I'm like, okay, so I can't lose myself in the process. So I have to learn how to be kind to myself, and what does that mean? And in doing so, then I can be a living example for others. The work that I do, I'm in HR, I do payroll and benefits, and a lot of the things that I look for is how to help my employees find wellness. And I realized that I was so focused on doing all the things for all of the people, including my family, that I was forgetting myself in the process. And like, well, I can't really work to show everyone unless you've actually done it yourself. And now I'm realizing I'm in a space where I need to focus on myself before I completely lose my shit.
Right.
And in doing so, then hopefully I will have more to come back to my employees and my family with.
Yeah, you're right. Self-care is not a bad thing at all. That's one thing I've discovered, in kind of my post-retirement, even though it's been a short time. Self-care is actually a good thing for the working world. And HR kind of has to lead the charge on that, because nobody else will. But yeah, self-care is kind of the things that is not talked about. It's kind of the last thing that's not talked about, but yeah, that really needs to resonate in the workplace, is just self-care. Otherwise people start falling off the edge.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%, like, self-care is not selfish, right? It's not a selfish thing to do. It's a way to, if you're not taking care of yourself, at some point you're going to get to the point that you can't take care of other people, right? It's going to lead to either burnout or depression, or being completely too stressed, or that you're like, you quit out of a frustration out of things, and then there's additional people that you don't serve. So that, finding that ability to do this, to be kind while also being kind to yourself, I think is a wonderful way to think about that, and is 100%, true. And so, Lisa's dropping some insight bombs today of like, hey, it's not just about external, it's internal as well. But I think thinking about that of like, yeah, what is that as a bigger scale? What is that of, in this focus of, if the goal is kind of do something great, what does that look like? Okay, well, get it right for myself. And then I imagine there's plenty of people that also have that same struggle, whether it's internally, the clients, the people that you have, employees at HR, otherwise, where it's like, as you work on those things and have those recognition, that realization, sharing those tips with other people, right? Because then it's not only being kind to other people, and hopefully that passes things along, but also, hey, here's a couple things that I've learned about that process. As you're working with individuals, then maybe they can build it themselves, right? So that's a great way, I think, to do something great, is you learn a skill set yourself, and then, bring some other people with you on that journey or that process. And passing it along to family members as well, of like, here's what I've think about, and here's what I learned. It's with my wife, it's one of the things that, I work a lot with her to, she wants to learn this yes and principle more. She wants to learn, okay, how can I think a little bit about that as the default, as my first reaction? It's not always going to be the right reaction, but my first reaction. And it's not always easy. We're dealing with she's German, so we're dealing with the very, problem solving mindset from right away. And here's what's wrong, and here's what we need to fix, etc. From how she grew up. But I was also kind of that same way from training it. And she, of course, is helping me with probably thousands of other things, so that, it's that back and forth. But bringing people along on the positive journeys that we take, I think, is a wonderful thing to explore. And I think it's a great reflection to kind of share back of, hey, this is a time for me to focus on me. What about you, Paul? Any goals, things that you're thinking of?
I've got them laid out, and self-care is one of them. Exercise, and I've gone back to the piano, which is an absolute beating, so practicing the piano and taking piano lessons and things like that, and reading more and things like that. So it's just a whole list. And I'm a little more, just regimented, and kind of go through the list on a weekly basis and kind of attack those things. So I wouldn't call them big audacious things, but they're out there, and I'm chipping away at them. So
yeah, no, I like it. Yeah, it's that aspect of progress, and kind of as you go forward, as you move forward, for sure. And I think to what you spoke about earlier, Lisa, it's very much also the journey, right? It's not the end destination itself, it's the journey. And because you can say you might reach a certain goal, but at what expense, right? Like, and I think that's part of the important thing of defining your values, of what you like, what you don't like, how you want to get there is, as I'm thinking 10x bigger for humor that works, right? We know that we do very well with our live programs, in terms of, I absolutely love speaking and workshops and things like that. But we also know there's a limit to the number of people that are going to experience my content in person, just in terms of globally. Like, I've done at this point, between stand-up, improv, speaking, over 2,000 deliveries of some component of it. And the one TEDx talk that we have has more than 14 million views, right? So it's like, this one 18-minute video has at least introduced more people to this topic than all of the other in-person things that I've done combined. And so if part of impact and thinking about 10x bigger is more of a global kind of message to sharing this, because I don't think it's certainly not just a Ohio thing where I grew up, and it's not just a New York thing where I lived for a long time, and it's not just a US American thing because that's the country I happen to be. It's like a global thing, right? What we say is, to humor is to human. And so we're trying to think about what are ways that we can impact more people, whether it's through virtual events or online courses or more books or translations of those books, et cetera. And so that's what we're thinking about doing. But at the same time, recognizing that my goal can't be getting to those things at the disservice to making my daughter laugh each day, right? Or having more time for me, et cetera. And so that journey component of how we get to do something, in some ways, maybe it's adding or changing from, not just doing something, but doing something great and doing something greatly, right? Doing it in a way that is, authentic to who you are, and in service of kind of the type of life that you ultimately want to lead. So, Yeah, so that's kind of the context to what I wanted to talk and explore a little bit today. Any kind of closing thoughts of what stands out to you from today, or something that you want to take with you, or where your journey takes you next in terms of thinking about either kindness for yourself or potential humor journey. I'll wrap up with where we're kind of headed with a couple of things, but anything, Paul, Lisa, that you're thinking about of where our conversation has led us and where it may go?
Well, it's been very helpful. I appreciate it very much.
I like the do things greatly. I think that sums it up for me. And Paul, thank you for the reminder about the piano, because
Do you need to practice today?
I need to get back to that. It's been a really long time.
Well, be careful. It's a very humbling experience, but you know, but it's pretty rewarding too. Yeah. So
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and those
Drew,
are the small
I would like to
reminders.
have a separate conversation with you if you don't mind. If you could send an invite for a call or something, or just give me a call. If you don't mind, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll share in just a moment how to kind of do that
Okay.
as well, for sure. And yeah, Lisa, maybe goes in hand in hand. Maybe piano comes into one of those things of that way to relax and decompress, because then you're thinking about that process as opposed to, like you said, media feed or whatever that you're going down. That's one of my takeaways of saying it and reminding it of like, yeah, how am I spending that relaxation or decompress time? What at P&G we called strategic disengagement time. We had to give a very corporate name for just chilling out a little bit, but strategic disengagement time. I'm happy. Thank you for the feedback on do things greatly, because I do think that's a nice thing that we've also stumbled upon in terms of thinking about how we execute. So maybe we'll continue to play with that a little bit more. As things go in terms of Humor That Works, where we're kind of headed, some of the things we're still working on some behind the scenes stuff to make things bigger and set up the systems for stuff. If you are on our Friday newsletter, which is probably how you heard about this, so you're probably on it, but we've just recently moved that to Substack, with the goal to create a little bit more of a community. So as you see things, if something resonates we are hopeful people will start to comment on those a little bit. And like we saw today, some of it's the conversation between the two of you, where it's like, okay, yeah, you can kind of help each other out or connect a little bit more as two different humans. And so we want to facilitate some of those conversations or connections, because we know we're very fortunate. There's some really cool, interesting people in the community that have attached to this message in some way. So we want to make sure that people are able to connect. So we've got that. We'll still have a few other things that are coming down the pipeline as well, which we're excited about. We do offer free kind of clarity calls, conversations, etc. So if there's anything that you want to continue to explore, you're welcome to do that. Let me drop the link in here, and Paul, this will be a good link for you to. Let me make sure I have the right one. So you can schedule some time, and it's just 30 minutes for us to get together and chat a little bit about anything that you want to chat about, so we could talk a little bit more about kind of this exploration, some things that we've learned, etc., along the way. Yeah, hopefully that helps. And of course, Lisa, if there's something too that you're thinking about and you want to talk a little bit more about kindness and what that can look like, you're also more than welcome to set some time up. But in the meantime, yeah, we'll continue to be sending out the newsletters every Friday with the exploring interesting topics and ideas. Would love your kind of thoughts and reactions to those as they go out. And we're still determining the topic for next month, but we'll be back again with another humor virtual happy hour for discussion and things like this. We'll figure out the exact kind of time and framing we might play with a little bit to see what works with people. But I appreciate both of you kind of coming in, and we got to have that is really interesting. Got to have a nice, fun kind of more conversation, as opposed to just here's a bunch of presentation stuff and there's a bunch of people just reacting in the chat. Actually got to have a conversation with it, which I really enjoyed. So thanks so much for joining.